This is All India Radio, Power of Listening. Under this series, tonight we take you on a journey to the world of yet another magnificent facet of the traditional Indian knowledge systems. I am Manoj Mainkar. In today's episode, we shall be focusing on Acharya Pingala's Chhandah Sutra. The expert on the show is Dr. Prathsarathy Mukhopadhyay, mathematician, writer and Indologist. Talking to him is Dr. Pratim Das, science communicator and writer. Stay tuned.
Welcome listeners once again to the wonderful radio series Power of Listening. Today we are going to inform ourselves about a wonderful heritage from ancient India, the Chhandah Sutra of Pingala Acharya. Chhandah or meter has been associated with verses, and today we would learn how this Chhandah acted as a cradle or sometimes a cover for cryptic laws of mathematics, and how the great seer Pingala contributed to such a continuum. We have with us in the studio Dr. Prathsarathy Mukhopadhyay, Associate Professor at the Ramakrishna Mission Residential College at Narendrapur. Dr. Mukhopadhyay is known for his intensive research in the field of history of mathematics, and he has authored quite a few extremely readable books on several aspects of this field. He has been a guest for this series earlier, and today, once again, we are delighted to have him with us. Welcome, Dr. Mukhopadhyay.
Thank you.
We would like to start this interview with a question that puts the relation of Chhandah and mathematics in proper perspective. We would like to know what was the relation of Chhandah or meter with the practice of mathematics in ancient India.
Well, I would rather put it in the other direction, that it attests to the level of mathematics that was being practiced at that point of time in ancient India. That a treatise on Chhandah, mind you, it is not a volume of mathematics per se, but even still it could so elegantly employ and execute such a high and beautiful level of mathematics in it towards analyzing various meters from the viewpoint of a prosodist. The Vedic seers attributed almost mystic significance to Chhandahs. Consequently, close attention was paid to the study of Chhandah Shastra, the science of verse meter. From Brihad Devata by the seer Saunaka, we see that Aviditva Rishim Chhandah Daivatam Jogomevacha Jadhapaye Japidvapi Papiyan Jayate Tusaha. Means, one who teaches or recites the mantras without knowing the seer, the meter, the god and the proper application of it becomes indeed a sinner. In Nirukta of Yashkacharya, one finds Chandangshi Chadanat iti. The word Chandas, it comes from the root chad, which means to cover. To cover what? Well, Oitarya Aranyak, it says that it covers the prana god, and the god is to be meditated as if it is covered by the meters. And Pingala Chhandah Sutra is the oldest known extant text on Chhandah. As in Agni Purana, the unknown author says, Chhando Vakshe Mulajjashtoi Pingaloktam Jathakramam. I shall now state about the Chhandahs in the order uttered by Pingala, our elder.
Right. So we are informed about the ancients of the Chhandah Sutra, the importance of it. And now we feel like asking, is Chhandah Sutra Pingala a gift of the period of the four Vedas, or was it written down somewhat later in time?
Well, you see, there are 6 Vedangas called Shadanga, as if the limbs of the Vedas. Shiksha, phonetics, Kalpa, the ritual practices, Vyakarana, the grammar, Nirukta, the etymology, Chhandah, the prosody or poetic metrics, and Jyotisha, the calendrics. And without rigorous study of these, it was said that one cannot comprehend the true teaching of the Vedas. They were composed presumably after the main layers of the Vedas and through a conscious and meticulous effort towards preservation of the meaning and external form of the mantras of the Samhitas. Chhandas is considered as the feet of the Vedas. Chhandah Padau tu Vedasya. alluring to a kind of oscillatory dynamism that is its characteristic feature. This particular treatise by Pingala is generally considered to be composed around 3rd century BC. But one must remember that there are quite other few references to older texts on this subject, unfortunately none of which is extant anymore.
Okay, so in the course of this discussion, we come to know that it could be the Chhandah Sutra of Pingala was written down in 3rd century BC. At the same time, we are also informed that along with the Vedas, we should give importance to the 6 Vedangas, without which the recitation or the learning of the Vedas would have been incomplete, as was considered in those days. Now, listeners, naturally, we would proceed further with this question. Did the seer Pingal seek to cover all known field of mathematics, at least at that juncture of time, in his comprehensive prosody text, or did he focus on just a few items?
As I have pointed out already, Pingala Chhandah Sutra is by no means a mathematics text per se. Rather, from the pure viewpoint of a prosodist, in the 8th chapter of this treatise, Pingala addressed some general issues on metrical pattern recognition and their analysis, and gave sutras number 20 to 35 towards their solution, that we now find amazingly and surprisingly mathematical in flavor, using the ideas now known as permutation, combination. Some of them leads to matrix structure made with 2 symbols, akin to the value assignment scheme of a Boolean variable in modern Boolean algebra. It involves calculation of binomial coefficients, sutra for finding their sum, which is usually attributed to Newton, construction of the so-called Pascal's triangle, which is generally attributed to Blaise Pascal of 17th century, sutra for the sum of a specific geometric series, of which the first term and the common difference are both 2, sutras akin to the conversion of decimal number to binary and binary to decimal, usually attributed to Leibniz, sutras that lead to a divide and conquer algorithm towards calculating higher powers of 2, an approach so common today in computer science. These are really mesmerizingly wonderful. Furthermore, here in sutras 29 and 30, Rupe Shunyam and Di Shunne, we find the oldest known direct reference to the mathematical 0 in Indian context. However, I am afraid that in this medium, I shall not be able to communicate all these in complete detailed mathematical description in the true sense.
Right. Now we are wondering whether there is any particular reason why these scholars of the 17th century in particular came to sort of elaborate on Pingalacharya's formula. Is there any particular reason as such?
Well, that is not the case actually. I would rather say that they have done their work independently. But if you just want to know that from when West became conscious about this great achievement of Pingala, then, the German Indologist Albrecht Weber was the first from the West to make a critical study of the Chhandah Sutra, and that was as early as in 1863. But as it happened with many other cases, it also did not become the subject of any special study in the West for a long, long time by the historians of mathematics. Well, one reason may be the fact that it was not contained in any strictly mathematical treatise, so it escaped their attention. The next significant work in the West was only in 1933. So you see the big gap. It was done by Ludwig Alsdorf, which was then translated from German by S.R. Sharma in 1991 in the Indian Journal of History of Science, volume 26. By that time, some other Indian scholars were also working on it. And then B. van Noten, a Dutch Indologist, published from Amsterdam in the Journal of Indian Philosophy, Binary Numbers in Indian Antiquity. It was in 1993, and the ball started truly rolling. In recent times, among others, Jayant Shah of Northeastern University of Boston, Mass. He has published in 2013 a very intriguing paper in Ganita Bharati, volume 35. The title of the paper is A History of Pingala's Combinatorics. There are also articles by Professor R. Sridharan, Professor P.P. Divakaran, Professor Amartya Datta of ISI Kolkata, to name only a few. In fact, a nice lecture on this topic given by Professor M.D. Srinivas can be found in the YouTube. Also, people like Professor Manjul Bhargava, the Fields Medalist. He is giving lectures on the work of later prosodists like Virahanka of 7th century CE, the Prakrita text of Britta Jati Shamuchaya, or Hemachandra of 1150 CE in the Chhandah Sutra, who, motivated by the earlier works of Pingala, have given the generating formula for the so-called Fibonacci sequence in context of matra meter analysis. That was given by Fibonacci, Leonardo Pisano, later in early 13th century CE, in a completely different context of rabbit breeding,
Listeners, we are with you in the series Power of Listening, and today we are discussing the Chhandah Sutra of Pingala Acharya, and with us, our guest today is Dr. Prathsarathy Mukhopadhyay. We have reached a stage where, after having understood, to some extent at least, the position of Chhandah Sutra of Pingal in the world of mathematics, we are very eager to know what the Chhandah Sutra gives us actually. I mean, could you please give a couple of examples to help listeners understand the meter designed by Pingal?
Well, this is going to be a little bit of technical, right?
Of course.
So let me just try to give very simple examples without getting into the actual richness of the subject. This metrical analysis, basically there are two kinds of meters. One is Akshara Chhandah or Britta Chhandah. It is done with respect to the syllables, the basic units of pronunciation. The other one is called Matra Chhandah. Pingala's work mainly deals with Britta Chhandah, the syllabic part of it, counting of the syllables. And there is a categorization of these syllables in two categories: Laghu, the light, or Guru, the heavy. Now, you may wonder that what makes this difference. Very, non-specific answer, I would rather say, will be vowels. Short vowels, they are forming the light part, and the long vowels, they are the heavy part. And there are further specific way of making distinction between which syllable is light and which is heavy. Laghu and Guru, Law and Go. These are the two Paninian type of metalinguistic marker that is being used by Pingala. And in the 8th chapter of his book, he is asking some questions. Those are really mathematical, truly mathematical in nature, regarding the analysis of this prosody. The later prosodists, they have referred to this section as I pointed out, as pratyaya. And they say, prostare nashtamuddishtam ekoddadi lagakriya shankha chaivadva jogascha shadete pratyaya srita. So there are 6 kind of pratyaya that's being technically discussed here. Prostara, which is the spread. The purpose is to systematically list all theoretically possible forms of a meter with fixed number of syllables. I give example. I think that will be easier to understand. Suppose there are only 3 places, blank places, to be filled with either Laghu or Guru.
L
How
or
many
G?
ways? Yes, L or G, or maybe La and Go. So it can be done. Say you start with Guru, 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 G, 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 and then you have G, L, L, and keep on doing all the possible other options. You end with L, L, L. So this is the kind of thing, and not just for 3. The rule that Pingala gives will allow you to do it for any n, however large it is. And the beautiful rules will not allow you to miss even a single possible option of this arrangement.
Right.
You see, you cannot do it arbitrarily. For 3, there are only 8 variants. Every place can be filled in 2 ways. There are 3 vacant places, so it's 2 to the power of 3, 8. Even Pingala knew that. His sutra was Vashavastrika. Vashava is referring to the word numeral 8, Ashtau Vashava iti. And Trika, when there are 3 such spaces, n is equal to 3, he is telling you that there will be only 8 variants. So the idea is mathematically very rich and it can be generalized. That has been done by the later prosodists. The book by Halayudha, Mrit Sanjeevani, Kedarabhatta Brittaratnakar, and many others, starting from Bharata, Natya Shastra. There are many commentaries and individual works of later prosodists available that are dependent on the original work of Pingala, where you find this. So you see, the first idea is this: how to assign this L and G, Laghu and Guru, and make all possible variants. The fantastic fact is, this leads to a kind of matrix arrangement which is exactly the same as we do it now for assigning 0 and 1 to the Boolean variables in Boolean algebra.
Right.
And that is how it leads to, ultimately, the next part. The next part was, you have to determine a serial number, a rank, for every such possible arrangement, which is a unique decimal number that can be associated with it as its rank. And the next, that's called Uddishtam. And the Nashtam, just the reverse of it, that you remember the rank number, but somehow the actual arrangement of Laghu and Guru is lost. Nashtam.
Okay, so
how you can recover that?
After you categorize these types, you forget all the details, you just remember the rank.
Yes, and from the rank, you can recover the exact arrangement.
Yeah. One thing I would like to ask you, now as you have already referred to the Boolean algebra thing, was Boolean algebra, let us forget George Boole, let us forget his contribution, let us forget the modern way of presenting Boolean algebra, but still, was Boolean algebra there in mind in some manner, in the mind of Pingalacharya?
No, that will not be a right thing to conclude. You see, whatever Pingalacharya is doing is from the perspective of a prosodist. This purpose of his is actually to, categorize it as a prosodist should look at it. There are so many variants. When you are going to make a 4-feet stanza, and there will be used only the 4 variants possible, but you have so many others, like, the Chhandas like Gayatri, Ushnika, Jagati. There are 7 basic Vedic Chhandas where this number N is fixed for each of them. So there are so many variants possible. The idea is how, without missing any of them, you can make all the possible arrangement, first of all. And then, for every possible arrangement, how you can assign a unique rank number to it. And having the knowledge of the rank number, how you can get back to the possible arrangement uniquely. And this actually turns out to be almost same to the conversion of binary to decimal and decimal to binary. Once you replace this Guru G by 0 and the Laghu by 1. Basically binary number are represented by 2 symbols, 0 and 1. And that is what at the base of computer science today.
Now, I would just like to tell the listeners that what we understand is Pingalacharya didn't write down his mathematics explicitly. We have to try to find his mathematics in the structure of the verses.
Exactly. That is the latter finding. I would like to quote from Van Newton's paper. What he is writing, that a system of notation that simply uses 2 symbols as markers of a place value does not necessarily produce a binary system. But if there is a system that uses 2 symbols in such a way that every string made with them has a unique decimal equivalent, and it is shown how one may convert the decimal number into a string of those 2 symbols uniquely, then indeed we do have a binary system, and Pingala has done at least this much. Unquote. So you see, this is findings of the later historians of mathematics, that so much deep mathematics is involved. Now the question comes whether Pingala is originally thinking of these mathematical things, or was it the fact that in that society, in that point of time, the society was so rich with mathematical understanding that even a prosodist could so easily employ these mathematical techniques into his subject, analyzing prosody for his purpose, using the mathematical tool. There is a, kind of pure mathematical spirit in this analysis, because all these variants, you are not actually going to use all of them. No prosodist will ever do that, because so many variants, like you see Jagati, 2 to the power 12 variants, huge number. But that these questions are being thought of and their answers are being given It shows of a definite mathematical maturity of thinking at that point of time. And then after that Nashtam and Uddishtam comes the idea of Lagakriya. I'm afraid that these are too technical for this medium to explain things in details. I'll just point out that this is where you come to understand the idea of binomial coefficients. This is actually a question that is being asked, that what is the number of sequence with a fixed number of laghu in them. So you have arranged all the laghu guru in a certain n is equal to something. And then you are asking how many of them has exactly this number of laghus in it, or exactly this number of gurus in it. Now that is where you are asking that given this many options, in how many ways you can choose some of them. That's the question, basic question of combination. NCR, out of n, how many ways you can choose R objects. And then this leads to a kind of arrangement in the shape of a mountain. That's called Meru Prasar, which turns out to be made with the binomial coefficients. And this turns out to be similar to what Pascal did in 17th century, almost 2000 years later. And not only Pingala, if you look at the later prosodists' work, like Virahanka in Brittojati Samuchaya, he talked about two different kind of prastara, Suchi Prastar and Meru Prastar. You have the idea of prastara in Bharata, in his Natya Shastra. And all this, and the other, exponents, Kedar Bhatta or the Mrit Sanjeevani by Halayudha. And these shows that this idea of using the concept of permutation, combination and binomial coefficients, these were there prevalent in that society much before the West came to know them or rediscovered them in their own way.
Dr. Mukhopadhyay, you have already referred to the impact of Pingalacharya's Chhandah Sutra on later prosodist, but we are eager to know more. Could you please elaborate on that a little more?
Yes, that's also a very important point to ponder upon. And in fact, all the later prosodists of India that we know of, they were somehow or other influenced by the fundamental work of Pingala, and they have referred to Pingala again and again. Their way of analyzing is so very similar. And there, in some of the cases, they have actually transcended Pingala and found something further fundamentally deep. Like one very fantastic example is that of Brittojati Samuchaya, the Prakrit text by Virahanka in 7th century, where you find verse that leads to a generating formula for the sequence of so-called Fibonacci number. Fibonacci, Leonardo Pisano, in his book Liber Abaci, talked about these numbers, which he got out of a theoretical rabbit breeding kind of experiment. And this turned out to be something fundamental in nature, obeying the law mentioned by Fibonacci. And here we find that at least 500 years before Fibonacci, in the book Brittojati Samuchaya, while analyzing the matra meters, is not syllabic anymore, it's matra in the sense of, laghu and guru. As matra, they are considered that one takes double time of pronunciation than the other. If laghu requires 1 unit of time, the guru syllable, it requires 2 units of time. That's the calculation, and thereby you calculate the matra meters. And here, in matra meter analysis of a specific type, he says, Dau purbo bikalpo ya miloitta jayate shankhaha, which means that you add the 2 previous stages, their final numbers, and you get the next stage, which is basically the generating formula for Fibonacci sequence. And not only this Brittojati Samuchaya, after that we get a similar enunciation by Hemachandra. In 1150, he says, Onkanto panta jogaha pare pare matranam. So again, analyzing this matra meter, he is saying that Onkanto and Upanto, the last and prior to the last stage, what you got, you add those 2 numbers, you get the next number that is going to be your sum. So you see, the Fibonacci sequence that we always refer to by the name of Leonardo Pisano was actually known to these seers much earlier than the time of Fibonacci.
So listeners, we are relating this series 1, 1, 2, 3, this Fibonacci series with the work of Pingala Acharya, and how to relate that is being narrated by Dr. Mukhopadhyay. I'm also reminded of a short paragraph in your book that told of the impact of this Chhandah Sutra on Sarangdev.
Right. Sarangdev and Bharata Natya Shastra. You see, this Pingala's algorithm were later generalized by Sharangadeva to the rhythms which use 4 kinds of beats: Druta, Laghu, Guru and Pluta, of duration, time duration 1, 2, 4 and 6 respectively. This is in Shangita Ratnakara in 1225 CE. Later on, in another direction, Narayana, he developed many different series and their applications in Ganita Kaumudi, influenced by Pingala's work. So, I would like to conclude with something that I'd like to quote from Manjul Bhargav's one particular statement that he made in Kolkata on 7th August 2014 in Times of India. Students in India should be taught about the great ancient Indian mathematicians like Panini, Pingala, Hemachandra, Aryabhata and Bhaskara. Their stories and works inspired me, and I think they would inspire students across India. Many of these works were written in Indian languages in beautiful poetry and contain important breakthroughs in the history of mathematics.
Listeners, as it happens almost in every episode, when we are at the crest of our discussion, the clock tells us it's time to leave. We can't help it, and we must admit that we have been initiated into a realm of mathematics that was completely unknown to us, and maybe this is the starting point. As Dr. Mukhopadhyay repeatedly said that this is quite technical and would be a little difficult for this medium, we were slowly trying to understand how difficult it could be. Could it be that after this session, after listening to this program, we start reading a book and the thing becomes clearer to us? And that is the reward a program seeks. So might be our program is successful in that way. Dr. Mukhopadhyay has once again initiated us into a field of mathematics that we will love to cling to, we will love to embrace, and later on feedback might come from you telling Dr. Mukhopadhyay that don't please stop telling us about this wonderful heritage. Thank you, Dr. Mukhopadhyay, for coming to our studios.
Thank you very much.
Discussing such a wonderful thing. And with that, we come to the close of this episode of Power of Listening. Till we meet again, goodbye and good night.
Acharya Pingala's Chhandah Sutra. You heard the 32nd episode of our all-new series on traditional Indian knowledge systems, Power of Listening. The expert on the show was Dr. Prathsarathy Mukhopadhyay, mathematician, writer and Indologist. Talking to him was Dr. Pratim Das, science communicator and writer. We hope you enjoyed it. This series has been conceptualized by Shashi Shekhar Vempati, CEO Prasar Bharati, and produced by Dr. Pratim Das and Vinod Kumar. Special thanks to AIR Kolkata, Amol, Parth and Randheer Thakur for their contributions. This episode is also available on our official YouTube channel, Akashvani AIR. Be there on the 13th of May, same time, same frequencies. This is Manoj Mainkar, signing off from Delhi. Bye for now.